Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Renee Freudenberger. That is a cool name, Renee.
Thank you. It's a wedding present.
Oh, of course. I interviewed a young adoptee called Wilson Munsterman a few months
Ooh,
ago, and I thought that was really a really cool name. So Munsterman and Freudenberger, yeah, they've both got a bit of, they both sound a bit German, don't they?
yes,
German,
yes. My
West
husband's
German,
family is German.
German, yeah.
Yeah,
So, listeners, Renee is she's a mum through adoption, and you were a foster parent before that, right?
that's correct. Yes.
Yeah,
I was a
and
therapeutic foster parent for 12 years, and
wow,
I stopped that work after I adopted my daughter. My husband and I really wanted to focus on her and her healing and her childhood experience and minimize additional loss for her. And so
yeah,
we stopped
yeah.
fostering.
My mum and dad fostered in the 60s
Oh,
before they got approved for adoption. But when they got approved for adoption, they stopped fostering so that they would be free to take a baby when one became available, and that was me.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And listeners, she's also a professional in this area. She's training development director at Woodford's Family Services. So
Correct. I'm the director of training and professional development.
professional development. Yeah, okay. So
Yes.
I've missed the professional bit out, but
No, that's
close enough.
okay.
We'll let me. Thank you.
No worries.
Um, so a big a big heart and a lot of experience in this
Mhm.
in this space. I'm also thinking about that 12 years of therapeutic foster parenting. That must have
Yes,
been an incredible learning experience for you.
it was for sure. When we started, not all children were considered to be therapeutic, even though in retrospect, I certainly identify that they are. If you're in foster care, by very definition, you are in need of therapeutic services. And my husband and I both learned and grew so much through that experience.
Yeah. So where was the growth? What was the areas that really stand out for you from that time?
Well, I think when I always knew I was going to be a foster parent. When I graduated from high school, I knew. And I think there's this assumption, this natural, I call it the puppies and sunshine phase of fostering, where you're just starting out and you really believe that love can solve problems for children, that they just need to be in a healthy and safe and loving environment. And I do believe that that is true. I still believe that that is true. But what I know is that with that comes a lot of skill development, a lot of empathy, a lot of intervention, and also an understanding that it's not about you believing that you're providing a loving and safe home to this child, but for that child to understand that they are in a loving and safe environment so that they can grow and thrive. And until you make the shift between, I'm doing all the right things, to, am I doing what's right for this child so that they feel safe and can grow, then you're missing the mark.
Yeah, yeah,
And it took me, I think I'm still learning that, but it took me many years to really make that leap from, I'm, you know, it being about what I'm doing to it being about that I'm doing what this child needs.
yeah, yeah. So you mentioned the thrive word there, right? So what does thriving mean to you from a personal perspective, and then perhaps we'll look at it from a child or a teen's adoptee's perspective. So what does thriving mean to you, Renee?
I think it's different for everyone, but I think thriving to me means that I am living a life that is of my own design, that brings me joy and peace and challenge, opportunity to grow, and strong relationships.
Yeah. So there's quite a lot there. I like the breadth it gives me. Uh, Lots to play with. How do you see the relationship between parents thriving and their kids thriving?
Well, children are sponges and they take in their surroundings and they are looking to their parents or their parental figure for guidance as in terms of how to move through the world, how the world works, how to handle challenges. And so when parents are able to do those things, when parents are able to set boundaries for themselves, set goals for themselves, handle challenges that come their way in a way that is positive and um, empathetic and resourceful, then they learn the same.
Yeah. So, in a word, is it modeling? Is that?
It really is. It really is modeling.
Yeah.
It's walking the walk, right? We can tell our kids what we hope that they will do and what are, some of the best answers to their problems. But until we demonstrate that these things are successful by doing it, not just talking about it, it's just talk.
Yeah. Before we hit record, we were talking about self-reliance. Uh, and you talked about thriving being living a life of my own design, you said.
Yes.
So those two things seem to kind of go together, the self-reliance piece and creating a life of our own design.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you, Renee?
Understanding the resources that you have and that you bring to everything that you do. You know, I think for many children that have been in my home, when you ask them what they want to be when they grow up, they can't even envision a future yet. And so that doesn't come from just pick a target and walk towards that target. That comes from building the resources that you need to achieve any goal that you might have. And that's self-reliance, learning how to be self-reliant, learning how to determine your own future and take control of that.
Yeah. And how does the modeling piece play into that?
Well, for me, I think I talked a lot as a parent about challenges that came up for me, shared examples that maybe my child did not witness occurring in my workplace or with my personal relationships, but also, with family dynamics and her own friendships, just sort of modeling how I handle my relationships, how I handle my work, how I handle my work ethic, and how I manage my household, all of those things, seeing me make decisions as an independent person, sharing my own challenges and how I was happy with how this turned out because I worked really hard. And also, I worked really hard at this and it didn't turn out the way that I hoped, but I'm okay. And I'm going to pivot and do something different. And so, just, you know, managing life's normal ups and downs with frankness about this is the reality and and building resilience around dealing with those disappointments and joy around celebrating the successes.
Yeah. In work, do you find a reluctance to what extent do foster and adoptive parents, to what extent are they reluctant to share those stories that you're talking about? To me, it sounds like you're sharing stories of your own stuff,
Mm,
to uh, so that your daughter knows that adults have tricky stuff too.
yeah.
And I did a lot of work in with kids before I came into to the doing the podcast 5.5 years ago, and I found that vulnerability about sharing tricky stuff that I went through, like being bullied when I was a kid. I found
Mm,
that that was like rocket fuel for empathy. And it
Yes.
kind of like I got the impression that not a lot of people, not a lot of adults dared to go there.
Right.
But I stumbled upon that, and I really found that that was, as I say, a real boost for empathy. And whenever I got anywhere near that space in a classroom with 30 kids, and teacher was there as well, right? So because of safeguarding, but I could feel the hum of the kids kind of disappear as
Hmm.
they became all ears.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, you clearly did the same. I was doing it as a one-off as a professional going into schools, but
Yeah.
you didn't. You did it as on an ongoing basis with your daughter. And I'm wondering, to what extent is that common practice, and to what extent is that are people reluctant to do that?
I think it varies, honestly. I We work with some amazing foster families here at Woodford's, and my experience has been in talking with them that some are very forthcoming. A lot of, as I'm sure you've stumbled across in your many years of experience with this, a lot of people are drawn to this work for a very specific reason, and oftentimes it has to do with a challenging family system of their own growing up. And so there can be a vulnerability and a fear that sharing that might somehow disqualify them as supporting a child from a traumatic background. I feel as though the opposite is true. I think if anything, it builds your empathy muscle to a degree that a child can only benefit from if you're willing to share some of that, not to dump your trauma on them,
Right.
but really to help them to understand, like, look at me, I'm an adult and I'm okay. I experienced these things. I have my own childhood trauma, and yet I have built my resilience and I've built a life that I'm happy with, that brings me joy, and I brought you into it, and I'm so blessed for that, and I continue to grow and to change. So I think when parents, whether they're foster parents or adoptive parents or just parents are willing to share some of those experiences, children children benefit from that because they understand everybody faces challenges, not just me. I'm not the only broken person. I'm not the only person that has had struggles. And out the other side can come a beautiful, happy, thriving person. And that's what I want. And so I'm paying closer attention, like you said, that hum goes down to how that can possibly occur. And, just as an add-on, my role here at Woodford's is very steeped in our training. Our job is to train social workers and foster parents and all kinds of paraprofessionals in how to do their work in a successful way and to provide the supports needed to our clients across the agency. And one of the things that we say to every trainer when they come through the door is your anecdotal material makes this real for the learner. And so share your experiences so that it's more credible. So telling someone you're going to be okay is great, but showing someone you're going to be okay, that's the magic.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking about it, I thought you were going to say magic dust or gold dust, right?
I was going to say secret sauce.
Secret sauce. Okay. All of these things apply, right?
Oh, yes.
Pick your
The
favorite
magic fairy
method.
dust. Sure.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And I just, as you were listening, I was reflecting on some conversations that I had yesterday and other conversations that I have. And the the more we kind of share the in those conversations, the more that we share the tough stuff, the deeper the conversation goes.
Yeah.
And I think I find that the professional and the personal experience in this space
Hmm.
adds for a depth of conversation to this podcast, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
That sometimes it's trickier to go when the professional experience is all that there is.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so how do you see that the the relationship between depth and empathy.
Between depth and empathy?
Depth
Yeah.
and entity, empathy, and obviously I'm talking about this kind of vulnerability and being able to not trauma dump, but to share your tough stuff
Yeah.
with your kid.
I mean, I think just being able to, I can think of countless conversations that I've had with my daughter where she has shared something that has come up for her. And I don't want to make it about me. I want to keep the focus on her. So I might say something like, well, would you like to hear about a similar experience that I had? The answer is usually yes. Or I'll just chime in and just start sharing with her something that happened. But also, it can just be as simple as saying, I had something similar happen to me when I was younger, and man, it was so hard. So I can only imagine like how hard this is for you, or I understand that this is really challenging. How can I support you? Sometimes it's, do you want advice or do you want me to just listen? But you're able to pull from your own experiences and have empathy for something that maybe someone else might say, well, that's just drama. That's just, I raised a girl. So there's a lot of drama that comes with that. And, resisting the urge to be dismissive is a lot easier when you have empathy, when you understand what a person has gone through and how very real that feels. Even if you know tomorrow it's just going to be a distant memory for them, in the moment it's huge and it's scary and it's upsetting. And having been through something similar, you can empathize and support
Yeah.
in whatever way is going to be helpful to that child.
And it's a considered approach you're talking about here. I mean, considered, but I'm presumably it's wisdom in the moment. I'm thinking of something I saw. I was at a conference a few years ago. And it wasn't an adoption conference; it was a marketing conference. But the people were using vulnerability as a strategy, and it was almost
Mm,
like color by numbers
mhm,
vulnerability, and it felt really forced
mhm.
um, and not considered. These were presentations, right? So these were one way communication, right? The
Right.
audience is either crying or laughing or clapping, whatever they're doing. But it's a one way conversation. Whereas what you're talking about is a more considered approach where your wisdom takes you where it goes in the moment in a real rather than a forced way.
Yeah, I think it's so important to be genuine, whatever your response is to kids when they're struggling, because kids are smart and they they see through our falseness, better than probably anyone. And kids with trauma are hyper vigilant to being played. They've been played by adults. That's maybe a terrible way to say it, but they've been abused and mistreated, and they're watching for signs that someone is not genuine in their affection, in their safety. And so when you're just phoning it in any way, it's not gonna fly.
No, no. How do you see the relationship between trauma and thriving? And if I can start by asking you about your own stuff,
Yeah,
and whatever and then we'll move on to the kid stuff. But
sure.
obviously, whatever you want to share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you see that?
Well, uh, I have certainly experienced my share of childhood trauma. And even just being a child of divorce in and of itself is a qualifying factor, I think. But there were other things involved. And I was lost for a long time. When I entered into my early adulthood, I was on my own at a very early age, had my own apartment at 18, had a full-time job, was paying all my own bills. But I felt really unlovable. I felt really lost. I could not if you asked me what I wanted to do with my life at that time, I certainly could not tell you. And fortunately, one of the beautiful things that came out of my childhood was that my parents, my mother in particular, she was very smart and she was very resourceful and resilient. And she held us to a very high standard, even when things were difficult. And I think even in my lost moments as a young adult, that was running through me, that resilience, that ability to make a better choice, set some goals for myself. And so I think, and also I didn't come to that in a vacuum. I didn't come to sort of my healing in a vacuum. I had therapy. I have wonderful sisters who are like my best friends. And so I had built this community around me of people who loved me and were invested in their relationships with me and who I wanted to be proud of me. And so I think my trauma taught me resilience because I also was developing the tools that I needed for resilience along the way and knew that I wanted something better for myself, for my family, for my child. And so that's the correlation that I make.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am who
Well,
I am because of the things that I experienced when I was younger. There are some things I wish hadn't happened, but also I know I am me because of them, and so wouldn't necessarily change
yeah.
them.
I mean, you mentioned healing
Yeah,
and resiliency. So what do they mean for you, and what do they mean in terms of yourself and the way that you raise and relate with your daughter?
that's a great question. I think for me, when I became a foster parent, by the time I became a foster parent, I was married, I had a decent job, I was feeling like, okay, I'm building a life. And I feel ready to share that with someone and help them. And my husband was game for it because I had told him we were going to do this. And I did have that sort of puppies and sunshine view of foster parenting that I talked about. And about 6 months into it, I realized I need therapy. This is bringing up so much stuff for me. My first foster placement, who I'm very close with to this day, had significant trauma. And hearing about some of the things like, the food insecurity and the abuse was really triggering for me. And I realized if I'm going to be able to help anyone, I need to really help myself. And if I'm being honest, looking back, I think even my marriage, I had very low expectations for it, given my own personal experiences. Um, and so I just did a lot of work on that, with a therapist, but also in conversations with my partner and my sisters, and and that it sort of helped me to build my internal resources. And when you can identify what you have inside for resources and outside of you in your environment for resources, that's really powerful in building resilience.
Yeah. Do you remember the moment when you realized that you
that
needed
I that I
that
needed
you needed
help.
help? Yeah.
Yeah, my my foster daughter um had I basically had told her that I loved her, and she had refused that. Like, as many foster children would, feeling we were like 6 months in, and in my mind, I was trying to make her feel safe. And as I said earlier, I didn't really know that that was not about me, but about her. So I had said, I love you, and I'm so glad that you're here. And there was some rejection that came with that, like an eye roll and a walking away. And I was devastated. Like, crying in the bathroom, devastated about that. And when I stopped crying, I realized this wasn't about me. It was, I mean, it wasn't about her. It was about me and what was going on internally for me. Like I felt a rejection that I had felt as a child. And then I realized, as I started to think about it, all the other things that were coming up um, as a result of her trauma
Yeah.
being really vicarious trauma for me.
To what extent do kids with trauma make it about make it about us when it's about them?
Every chance they get. I mean, are you asking like for them, from them, or
I'm
from
not.
us?
I'm not sure. Uh, I'm actually thinking about something that happened in a conversation with me and somebody recently.
Yeah.
Uh, when there was when that other person made it about me, but it was it, and it hurt, and it took me probably 4 days to realize it was
Mm,
about them.
hmm.
It was
Yeah.
their SH1T. It was their trauma, not
Yeah.
mine. But that person made it about me.
Right. Well,
And
that's more
that,
comfortable, isn't it? Like it's more comfortable for that person. And I think I said every chance they get
yeah,
because if you're not able to successfully, and in the beginning, it's just not there yet, but if you're not able to successfully create a space for a child to sit with their trauma and understand it's not my fault, before they get to that, many of them think it is exactly their fault. And so it's much easier when there's a challenging behavior, let's say, to blame you in some way, blame the people around them, make it about the people around them. And that's a challenge because there's no growth for the child in that moment. There is just yet another adult disappointing them. And so that's where really creating a space where they feel safe, where they have that felt safety, as TBRI says, where they can start to say, okay, this is about what's happening for me. I feel scared because of this thing that has happened to me in the past being brought up, and I can deal with it. Otherwise, they can just push it on to the way you're behaving as you address their challenging behavior or
yeah,
their trauma of the week.
yeah. Um, some things occurring for me here in the kind of the the two sides of the coin, right? So there's I, I'm thinking about my own uh, trauma surfacing at 40, right?
Mhm.
It hadn't surfaced before then in words that came out of my mouth, as far as I was concerned, right? So I was blind to it. I was blind to
Right.
I was blind to, and that's what happens with pre-verbal trauma.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't have words for it. Um, it's like it, so we don't have words for it. It's like an iceberg. We can't see it, right?
Mhm.
And I put it outside. I put it outside as in she didn't love me,
Right.
right? The other side of that coin is to take it, make it internal. I'm unlovable. So there's two sides to one coin. I'm unlovable, or she didn't love me.
Right.
Um, I'm not quite sure what the question is. It's
And
both, right?
yeah, it's both and it's neither because maybe she really did love you
Well,
and that was the choice. But isn't it interesting that that's not either of the answers that you came up with?
No, I guess that's the next coin.
Yeah.
So
That's the coin we hope to get to. I am
well, they,
lovable.
yeah. So what happened was these words. I shared these words with a, a therapist type lady. She was actually a horse whisperer, right? She was a
Mhm.
horse whisperer and coach, autistic. She did communication skills, and
Yeah.
she still does communication skills with horses, with autistic kids and other random people like me, right? So I said she didn't love me enough to keep me, and Sarah said, I'm a mum, Simon. I don't think it would have been like that. So the fresh thought of she didn't love me enough to keep me was challenged by Sarah, in for want of a better word, and and I saw the truth in what she said, and I got at a fairly deep intellectual level that she didn't reject me.
Hmm.
But then 10 years later, when I found out the truth, I got my adoption file, and um, I felt her love for me. So at one point there was and I can only see, I can only that only makes sense looking back, right? So
Hmm.
I would say at the time her love for me landed in the first conversation, but it didn't actually really land until 10 years later, finding the truth and getting
Yeah. I'm so glad that you did. I'm so glad that you were able to see your file and learn that.
yeah.
See it in writing. That's not everybody gets that.
Well, yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. It was big. It was huge. It was
Yeah.
huge. And I don't know. What have you learned about lovability and kids with trauma feeling unloved and their projection? What?
I mean, I wish I had a really great way to articulate it. It's so challenging because for most of them, there's not an ending like the one that you just described. Seeing a file can sometimes make it worse because there's decisions and abuses and neglect that led to this child's where they are now, that their adoption or their foster care, and it's hard for them not to internalize that. And for my own daughter, I was very careful in the words that I chose to describe her mother because I didn't want it to be an us and a them situation where she was an enemy or bad. Because when the person that made you, where your DNA exists, is bad, then what does that make you? So I was very careful to say, your mother loved you but was just not in a position to care for you safely and needed help in making that decision. And that's how you ended up with us, which was such a blessing to us. Um, Years later, as she got older, and one of the maybe pros and cons of our social media driven world today is the ability to find people very easily and connect with those people, which for many foster children, they are driven to do that. Um, and then they connect with their biology and those folks who have failed them in some way. And unless there's been profound healing, it can be either way, it can be a very emotionally difficult situation. And that was my daughter's experience, is that it was not what she hoped it would be. She tried to connect with her biological family and felt very unsafe and very, unfortunately, her mother said some pretty cruel things to her that deepened her concern about her level of lovability, and that somehow it was her specifically that was the problem. However, the more time that she spent trying to build some sort of relationship, the more she saw their unhealthy behavior and started to realize these are the choices that this person makes without me in the room. They're the same choices. This has nothing to do with me. And I think it took her a really long time. And probably I would say she's still working on it, starting to understand I am lovable. Her choices are a result of her own trauma and her own experiences and her own ability to make healthy choices for herself. And they're not a reflection of my value as a person.
Yeah.
And so she had to come around to the same thing as you did, but in a different, more roundabout way that involved maybe a little bit more suffering and triggering because she had to be
Yeah.
exposed to something that was dangerous for her initially and then still felt dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. A story's coming to mind about a mentor of mine who realized he had uh, his first proper girlfriend. He thought it was, I think he was early 20s. He thought that they were going to get um, married and have kids, and that was it. And
Mm,
then she dumped him, and he had a profound realization that uh, putting his peace and happiness in somebody else's hands was, uh, yeah, a recipe for disaster.
yeah,
And that caused him to look inwards at, I don't know, 2021 something. And it's a 180-degree shift
mm,
because we're uh, conditioned to look for love outside, aren't we?
right. Yeah, absolutely. And children from trauma backgrounds can engage in some pretty dangerous, challenging, and risky behavior in the seeking of external validation. And so it's great that at 21 years of age, he had that insight and could make a shift to
Yeah.
finding his own value internally.
The more conversations that I have, the more clear to me that the whole thing comes down to insight.
Hmm. It really does. I agree. There has to be a safe place for that to grow. There has to be time and space for that. And that's, I think, where parents come in, is creating that safe space for those insights to develop.
To to what extent do we talked at the start of the conversation about sharing our own stuff?
Yeah.
Presumably, that's with a view that our insights catalyze some insights amongst the kids, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That hopefully they'll start to see that, like, and internalize that piece instead of just all the negative things that are swimming around in their heads that they've been told or that they just feel innately because they've experienced trauma at an age before they can
Yeah.
remember it, but that has impacted them in such a way that it's shaped their self-view.
Have you talked to your daughter about unlovability?
About vulnerability.
No, about unlovability.
Yeah, we've had definitely conversations about that because uh, we her biological mother told her that she didn't love her, didn't want her, and this was in her adult years. And that was really a blow for her. She had experienced some pretty significant trauma as a teen, unrelated to her early childhood experiences, but very triggering. She was a victim of a violent assault, and it really set her back. She developed complex PTSD. And in the face of all of that and the work that she was doing just to survive, she reconnected with her biological mother, and it was not a supportive situation for her. And I think she really spiraled. I mean, she was already struggling, but then she really spiraled hearing those words from from her mother. And, for me, I was I was first of all just worried about my daughter living through all of that. It was a really, really scary time for her father and I, and very gently trying to prove to her and in a way that she would see that she was lovable, that this was not about her, and uh, and to help her to call upon the resilience that we knew that she had built over the years, which seemed inaccessible to her for a period of time. And so we did have a lot of conversation about that. And sometimes it was just one or two words because that's what she was capable of. Um,
Yeah,
and then slowly she, with her own hard work, came to see that she had worth, and that this was not about her being unlovable, but about some people around her being unsafe and not healthy themselves.
yeah. I feel the need to drop in some hope here, you know?
Yeah.
So, after I found that, got the file and read this letter that helped me see my birth mother's love for me, feel my birth mother's love for me. I found out that she died, and
Mm,
I was okay. And then a few years later, I called I, chance circumstances led me to get information about my biological father, and I called him completely out of the blue. So the last thing he knows, right? He signed away his rights on a
mm,
little crappy piece of paper, 1966, and then this guy rings up out of the blue. Me rings up out of the
mm,
blue, 56 years later, and he didn't want to know,
mm,
and I was okay,
mm,
right? So, what seems what people when people say to me that I say, well, I found out that she died, and people go, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, well, it's okay. I didn't grieve. I didn't feel. I didn't grieve that. That didn't cause
mm,
me grief in the
mm.
grieving. That wasn't a huge loss for me.
Right,
That didn't impact me poorly, and
right.
it nearly did the rebuttal or rejection, whatever you want to call it, from my biological father. So we doing our work um, can mean that what would be seem to be um, bad stuff, bad outcomes
Mm.
don't don't necessarily make us feel bad.
That's right. That's right. And that's when you have done that work and you've built your own resilience and you've built your own self-esteem and your own self-worth, then it's easier to handle whatever disappointments might come
Yeah.
your way, you
A-
know?
And the biggest thing here is that feelings are an inside job, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. For my daughter, uh, a couple of years ago, she became a mom, and it was unexpected blessing. And what has been the most joyful thing for my husband and I is watching her be this extraordinary mother. And when you talk about, just to bring our conversation full circle, the empathy and how that leads to um, how your experiences can lead to greater empathy, I think her experiences have made her an extraordinary mother because she's unflappable in a way that I only wish that I had been. And she is able to be playful with her daughter and align with her when she's two now, so she's feeling all the feelings and helping us all to feel them too. And my daughter is just so empathetic to that and so calm. Not that she, never gets frustrated, but just that I think she's really dialed into the emotions of her daughter and can just come alongside her in a way that I think all the work that she's done over the years has gifted her this ability. And isn't that what we want, is for our kids to have a better life than we had, to have a better experience. She's fiercely protective, but not in a way that's limiting. Like she exposes my granddaughter, who by the way is adorable, to everything.
Really?
She is not shy about taking her out into the world, but she is holding that hand closely and protecting her, but also building her confidence and like just watching it all happen. It's so rewarding and so joyful for my husband and I to see her thriving and to see her uh, impacting this little person in such a way. And I don't think she could have ever imagined that for herself. A couple of years ago, we weren't sure we could imagine that for her, but here she is,
Yeah, she is.
resilient
Yeah,
and thriving.
I'm fine.
She's thriving. And, I would say she's 27. So there was some patience involved. And, I I think the timeline for adopted children, particularly those with challenges and trauma, can be longer than the average bear. And that as parents, we just have to stay the course and continue to. I'll never stop parenting her, but I have to parent her in many different ways now than I did even 3 years ago.
Yeah,
So that patience and understanding that it might take some time, but it's worth it. It's worth the journey.
yeah, yeah. Wow. Feels like a good place to bring it in, Renee. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
great.
Thank you
Well,
so
I'm
much.
so grateful for the opportunity to speak with you about this today, and I'm
Yeah,
really glad that you do this podcast for all those adoptees and adopters out
yeah,
there.
yeah. Thank you, Renee. Thank you,
Yeah.
listeners. We'll speak to you again very soon. Take care. Bye bye.
Okay, take care.